Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for making it on a Monday morning right after a bunch of tornadoes, pretty early to come and, talk about, listen to, and engage with the idea of competency-based education. My name is Amy Lightnin. I'm the Deputy Director for Higher Education here at the New America Foundation. Before we go any further, I just want to acknowledge, I think everybody has the agenda that has the logos of all of the other co-sponsors of this event. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that they were here and knew who they were, even though you're going to be hearing about them and from them throughout the rest of the morning. So in alphabetical order, from the American Association of Community Colleges, where is Dan? Dan Phelan, thank you so much for helping us and hosting this with us. And then from ACE, the American Council on Education, we have Louis Soares. And from Western Governors University, we have Sally Johnstone. So thanks so much for being here. For those of you who are awake and who are tweeting, there is a hashtag. It is hashtag CollegeCBE. And so why we're here. So as everyone knows, and which is probably why you're here, there's been this explosion of interest in competency-based education these days, from students to employers to institutions and policymakers. And we'll talk about the policymakers in a little bit. It seems like lots of folks are interested in moving away from measuring and rewarding time to measuring and rewarding learning. So, and that is regardless of where it happened or how it happened. And for those of you who are in DC, which is probably most of you, very DC focused, CBE is everywhere these days. I mean, you can't turn on a hearing on the House side or the Senate side, no matter what the topic. I mean, it could be healthcare almost. And you hear people talking about competency-based education. President Obama has recently started, his administration has started to allow financial aid to pay for the direct assessment of student learning, to pay for competencies rather than time. And he recently announced his intention to create some safe spaces for innovation using what's called the Experimental Sites Authority, which will hopefully enable some more competency-based models. And the House has introduced its own bill that will allow for a competency-based demonstration project, and it sounds like the Senate is getting ready to introduce a similar companion bill on their side. So why the interest? Part of it is this promise that CBE can help address some of the challenges facing higher education, whether it's skyrocketing college costs, graduates struggling to find good jobs, and employers struggling to find good graduates. So, and a few schools, notably Western Governors University in southern New Hampshire, have gotten a lot of attention over the past year and even before that. But there's been a lot less attention paid to CBE at community colleges, despite the fact that competency-based design is really at the core of what many community colleges are doing and have done, particularly, but not exclusively, on the non-credit side. So today we're going to look at how the competency-based education programs are unfolding at community colleges and looking at some of the challenges, both sort of on-the-ground implementation challenges and policy challenges that are facing these institutions. So to kick us off, we're going to get some perspective from the Department of Labor. And I just want to make a little bit of a note. The Department of Labor has nearly $2 billion in grants to community colleges. It was $2 billion, but sequester sort of, lopped off a little bit throughout the past 2 years. But there is money on the street to really help community colleges develop innovative programs. And competency-based education is not just a use of funds, but really highlighted in this last round. And part of I think what's interesting is, despite these dollars on the street, we've heard very little about it in the sort of broader higher education world. And I think in some respect, that's because it's the worst named, if not the worst named, one of the worst named, and certainly one of the worst. There's worse names? It's one of the worst named and worst acronymed programs that we have. It's the I have to look down at it, even though I worked on this when I was at the Department of Education. The Trade Adjustment Assistance Community College and Career Training, TAACCCT grants. But we're just going to call them TACT grants for short for the rest of the day. So here to speak about that and so much more is the Acting Assistant Secretary for Employment and Training and the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Labor, Eric Selznow. According to his bio, he's focused on two key outcomes. One, a properly prepared workforce to meet the current and future demands of the nation's employers. And two, providing opportunities for all Americans to succeed in the workforce. that sort of sounds like competency-based education to me. So he recently joined the Department of Labor. Again, we're trying to get away from the false dichotomies between labor and education. And he's been in the workforce development space for nearly 3 decades. We're so glad that he is at Labor and so glad he's here to share with us some of his thoughts about what Labor has done and is planning on doing. So thank you, Eric.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Amy was commenting earlier how early it is for her to be here in the office at 9 o'clock. And I have to tell you, we're halfway through our day over at the Department of Labor, let me tell you. Anyway, thanks for the opportunity to come. I appreciate the invite from all of you here and all the sponsors and all the participants. My name is Eric Sellas now. I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Labor. I work for a fellow by the name of Tom Perez. He's the Secretary. I think we're in day 120. He's day 122. Still get lost in the halls of labor quite a bit. You know, I worked in prisons and jails for about 25 years. Walking through the Department of Labor, who's been in that building? I've been in nicer prisons, I just have to tell you. But anyway, it's a thrill to be there. It's a thrill to be working with Secretary Perez. And I just want to take a few minutes first, welcome you. This is a hugely important piece of work. I wish I could stay for the entire conversation because I need to learn more about this competency-based framework and the education and the expansion of it. We're very interested. I'll talk a little bit about that momentarily. So I would like whatever comes out of this meeting, please make sure we get it or come brief us about it. We'd like to hear more. And I should just tell you that Secretary Perez is with Dr. Biden today. He's in Florida, Kentucky, or North Carolina over the next 2 days, visiting several TACT grants. Yes, it is the worst named program, the worst acronym in the history of grants that I've been involved with. But anyway, he's out there talking at the colleges and to the colleges and meeting with students. And for those of you who know the Secretary, he's just not going there to give speeches. He's sitting down, he's talking to students, he's talking to faculty, he's asking questions, trying to figure out what it is. What's going on, because we have one more round of TACT coming, and it'll be out sometime after the first of the year. It's about all I can say at this point. But we want to hear from your community and hear a little bit more about what we could do to make that better. We've seen some great programs across the country. I'll talk about a few of them. We really want to take this last round and do whatever changes we need to do to make it effective. The Secretary is incredibly interested in sort of putting his hands on this. It's, you know, we're 150 million into it, another 1.5 billion into it. Sorry, we've got another, my zero's in the wrong place. We've got another round coming out, which is the last round. We'd like to keep it going. We'll see how that goes. But there's a couple of things you'll hear the Secretary and hear ETA talk about. We're talking about the employment rate, wages, opportunity, and government effectiveness. Big, broad buckets, but we are really trying to zero in on the employment rate, particularly with long-term unemployed. I know many of you all serve that community. Competency-based is perfect for that population, certainly for short-term programming. A lot of these folks don't have time to go, 2-year degrees in AAs and what have you, but certainly competency-based retraining, retooling is critically important. We want to impact the employment rate. Wages is a huge thing. Our system's do an okay job at wages for a lot of folks. We track that. We think we can do better. We would like to increase wages for all workers, and there's some strategies in place to try to do that. We think that fits into the next bucket of opportunity, and the opportunity really is, a lot of low-wage, low-skilled folks. I mean, I keep going back to the Reach Higher study of 2008, then the PIAC study that just came out, the PIAC survey about basic skills, and whatever the numbers, whichever study. And I was looking at the recommendations from the Reach Higher report a couple of years ago. It doesn't seem much has changed since then, but that was startling information to me about people without high school diplomas, literacy skills, or mastery of the English language to succeed in the workplace. So those problems are still with us. And I think the opportunity for lower wage, lower skilled people to get the basic education and credentials they need to move forward in our economy is critical. And the last thing is effectiveness and government effectiveness. And for those of you who don't know the Secretary, one of the things he's in on is that he's all about is collaboration, integration, adult learning, workforce, HHS, ed, labor, all those folks working together, targeting, pooling resources, working with philanthropy to try to maximize our effectiveness. And you all know this as well as I do. Sequester has impacted ETA more than I ever could have imagined. It's impacted the local workforce development system that's got 530 workforce boards, 2,600 American job centers across the country. Huge impact on that. It's been ugly for our system, and as a result, less people are getting trained, less people are getting skills, less people are getting the competencies they need to move forward. Whether we have a skills gap, a wage gap, whatever, we don't really care what it is, but we talk to a lot of employers, and employers say they're just not finding people with the right skills, whether they're the basic competencies. Again, the secretary will call that essential skills. We don't use the word soft skills because they're very essential. Barbara, you've heard that before, right? They're essential skills. So whether it's that or the occupational skills and the harder skills, that's what employers have said, continue to say. They've said it to me for the last 20 years that I've been in this business, and they continue to say they're not getting what they want, even with the high unemployment rates that we have. So competency-based, so anyway, we continue to be, let me get back to competency in a minute, but we continue to be industry-driven. We continue, one of the other priorities is us to be increase employer engagement. And what we mean when we say that is there's a lot of ways employers can get engaged. We hope it's a lot more than coffee and donuts or a quarterly advisory meeting. We want them engaged in curriculum. We want them engaged in competencies. We want them engaged in telling the workforce system writ large what are the skills, competencies, and credentials they need. You all are aware of that. Many of you are engaged in that process. But there's several different ways to get engaged. There's drive-by engagement, and there's serious and intense and long-term engagement from an industry cluster, an industry sector within your region that helps drive your economy. So those sort of sector partnerships, industry-driven solutions to workforce is critical. I know many of you in this room do that. We would like to see more of that. We would like to see some of that industry-driven problem-solving expanded. We'd like to see more of that in the next TAC round that comes out. You'll see a lot more about employer engagement and all the Department of Labor grants coming out in the future. You will see a big theme in that. And again, you got to talk to the job creators if you want to understand the curriculum, competencies, and skills needed in the workplace in that community. I used to be a state workforce administrator. I looked at the industry and competencies and issues across state. That was nice, and that was great work. That didn't do it, I think. Regional work, labor shed work in a region or a community is much more effective to figuring out what that group of employers want. So we hope to see some more regional work happen across the country. The first few rounds of TACT have focused a lot on the competency. St. Clair Community College in Broward, I can't even pronounce this one, the community college in Worcester, Mass. Quincy, that one. They've done some competency-based work. Butler Community College in Kansas, Lynn Benton Community College in Oregon is working on competency-based models. There's a lot of different competency-based models out there. We would like to propel that. People want skills. People don't have a long time to learn. Employers need people quickly as the labor market is changing so quickly. We think you're onto something with a competency-based approach and framework. How we can help in terms of policy or incentives to increase that, please let us know. I look forward to whatever you come out of today with, and we look forward to learning more about it. And Amy, I'll invite you and some of the others today to come brief us on this when this gets done. So I think it's an exciting day for you. I'll stay for a little while today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take those as well. But we're going to be talking about employer engagement, regional work. One of the last things I want to leave you with, I thought I was going to wrap it up, didn't you? One of the last things I want to leave you with is a couple of things that we've seen in some sites across the country that we've been impressed with. So in the LA area, there's I don't know how many community colleges are in that consortium around the LA area. They never really worked together before. They were thrilled at the opportunity to do that with this new TAC thing, and it tied them into the wage record data in California so they can really look at some of the results. And that sort of wage record earnings and what happens post completion and a year from now, and employment rates, job retention, and wages becomes very important. The other thing we saw, and this is something I would like to see, and we'd like to see with all the programs do, is your connection with workforce investment boards and community-based organizations. Front Range Community College, they had, I think, 6 colleges in a consortium in manufacturing in Colorado. The employers were there, the manufacturers were there, they were part and parcel the whole way there. What was really important, I went and visited a class that they were doing, and I've done enough of these tours and given them myself to know how to do this and make them look good. So I stuck around and asked a lot of questions afterwards, and here's what I saw. I saw a class with your traditional 19-year-old college student, a 47-year-old laid-off worker, 2 or 3 people from one of the local one-stop centers, and 3 women from a local displaced homemakers program. And so I was thrilled to see that. Workforce system, community-based organizations were benefiting from the work that had done to build the capacity in that college. Not all of the TAC grants are like that or do that. So we're building great capacity. There's been huge investments. We'd like to see a lot of folks take advantage of that, whether they're coming from low-wage, low-skilled adults from the one-stop system or from community-based organizations. Front Range had 3 workforce leaders as part of their management group. They all were engaged. They just didn't sign off on the grant. They were engaged. And the community-based organizations, Front Range actually went out and outreach to those folks. It wasn't an accident. It was purposeful and with intention. And so we would like to see all sorts of folks across this country get connected to and be referred to the capacity that's been built in the colleges. So with that, I'll say have a great day. Thank you very much. You'll be hearing from us, and we'd like to hear from you. Have a great day.